Well, we've been thinking about some of the parables just recently, and today we're going to think about another one. And it starts with Jesus. He's going around the streets, going around the villages, and around the different towns in the area. And as he's going around these places, he's talking to people and he's teaching them something about what the Bible has to say to them. A bit like when you go to Sunday school or in the main service. You're taught things from the Bible. And you know, the people there heard all about sin. You know, some people thought they were really religious, and Christ said that they were hypocrites. They thought they were okay, but they weren't, because they weren't doing what God wanted. They were doing what they wanted. He talked about salvation, and it is only through him. He spoke to them about what happens after life. This life, heaven and hell. And you know, as he was talking about all of these really important things, the crowd, well, they just seemed to be listening. But this man, his mind was on something else. You see, there was something else which was more important to him to think about on this day. Do you know, he was remembering his dad had died. Now, he wasn't actually thinking about his dad. What he was thinking about was the money his dad had, because it would be divided between his children. So they would all get some of what his dad owned. And that's what he was thinking about, his money, what he could do with it. And then when Jesus stopped talking for a moment, he jumps in and he says, Jesus, tell my brother that he has to share the money outright. He thought he wasn't getting the right amount of money that he deserved. And you know, Jesus said to him, listen, there's things which are more important that you have to think about than the money that you've got and all the things that you've got. You see, life isn't about what you've got, your possessions. You know, have you got the best toys? Have you got the best car? Have you got the best house that you want? All these things people often think about, but life isn't all about that. And he told them a parable. It was a parable about a man who was really, really rich. Loads of fields, and he had planted all the crops in the fields, and the crops had begun to grow. And you know, this year was a really, really good harvest. Loads of things were coming in, and he could see them growing. And he thought to himself, you know, I've got a little problem. What am I going to do with all of this grain and of all the crops which I've got? What am I going to do with them? And then he began to think. He said, well, the barns that I've got, a little bit small, I'm going to knock them down and I'm going to build some bigger barns. And so the bigger barns began to go up. And there they were massive. And he put all his goods into those barns. And then he began to think, well, what am I going to do now? Now I've got all of this, you know, goods, all this money, as it were. What am I going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to sit back, have a little bit of a party, going to have something nice to drink, something nice to eat. I'm going to enjoy myself. You see, he thought he had made it. He had everything he thought he needed. You know. But you know what God said to him? You fool. Because that night, he died. All the things which he really wanted in life, they weren't his. Who would those things be that you know, he'd worked so hard for? They weren't his, because when you're dead, you can't take it with you. And that made him think. And you see, Jesus was saying to them this: don't be covetous. Don't be thinking, what I want in this life is this, and that's going to make me happy. Lots of possessions, lots of things. If I get my exams in school, then that'll be great. And all these sorts of things people set their hearts on in this life. And he was saying, Don't be like that. You need to think about things which will last. These things, buy a new car. How many people have bought cars here? And you know, after a few years, they're old, falling apart, and you need to replace them. Things don't last. But you see, the things which we need to set our heart upon are things which will last. And of course, we need to come to Christ, and we need to ask him for forgiveness of sins. And we need to put our trust in him so that we can go to heaven. Question was, what about you? Do you know, I hope you're not like that man who was there in the crowd. Jesus was talking about all of the important things in life, and he wasn't listening. We need to listen to what the Bible has to say, read it for ourselves, hear it in church, and not be thinking about other things, rather than thinking about the main things which last for eternity. Here was a man only planned for this life. We need to think about eternity, and we need to ask ourselves, what will we have? What will we be? Where will we be when we die? There is heaven and hell, and we need to think about eternity, and we need to come to Christ, and we need to put our trust in him. Do you know, there's a song, the wise man built his house upon the rock. The foolish man built it on the sand. What happened? The house which he built, it fell down.